My name is Olivia. I'm 27, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family disappointment, the one they said would never stand on her own 2 feet, the daughter who couldn't be trusted to make her own decisions, the burden they claimed to love while reminding me at every turn how incapable I was. I still remember my father's exact words at that final dinner, his voice cutting through the clinking silverware. "You'll always need us to survive, Olivia. That's just who you are." My mother nodded beside him, that familiar look of pity washing over her face, the same expression she'd worn at every parent-teacher conference, every failed job interview, every relationship that fell apart. What they didn't know that night was that I had already packed a single backpack, that I had exactly $237 to my name, that after 27 years of being told who I was and what I couldn't do, I was about to vanish from their lives. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about the impossible journey from that dinner table to the day I walked back through their front door, no longer the daughter they had written off, but a woman they couldn't recognize, a woman whose success would render them completely silent. And if you've ever been told you're not enough, that you'll never make it on your own, I need you to hear what happened next. Because what they don't tell you about rock bottom is that it's the perfect foundation to build something they never imagined possible. The breaking point. Family dinners at the Morrison house always felt like performance evaluations. Every Sunday, gathered around my mother's heirloom table, we'd take our assigned seats, my father at the head, my older brother Michael to his right, my mother opposite him, and me, always closest to the kitchen. Convenient for when I needed to fetch something they'd forgotten. That particular Sunday seemed ordinary. The roast was slightly overdone. My father complained about work politics. Michael shared news about his promotion. When attention finally turned to me, I mentioned I was considering starting a small graphic design business. The silence lasted 3 seconds before my father's fork clattered against his plate. A business? With what experience? With what clients? His laughter wasn't cruel, it was worse. It was dismissive. "You couldn't even keep that receptionist job for more than 5 months." "That was different," I said, gripping my napkin under the table. "I hated that job. This would be something I'm actually good at." My mother reached across, patting my hand with that familiar, condescending touch. "Sweetheart, stability first, dreams later. You know how you get when things become overwhelming." "How I get?" The words caught in my throat. "Emotional," Michael chimed in, mouthful of potato. "Remember the meltdown when you tried living in that apartment with Rachel?" I did remember. I remembered Rachel stealing my rent money. I remembered calling home in tears, asking for help. I remembered my father's sigh as he drove 3 hours to rescue me again. "You've always needed a safety net, Olivia," my father continued, cutting his meat with surgical precision. "There's no shame in accepting who you are. Some people just aren't built for independence." That's when he said it, the words that would change everything. "You'll always need us to survive. That's just who you are." Later that night, I stood in my childhood bedroom, unchanged since high school despite my having lived there into my late 20s. Debate trophies I'd won but never felt proud of because my father had written my arguments. College acceptance letters to schools I never attended because my mother thought they were too far away. Photos of family vacations where my smile never quite reached my eyes. I pulled out the backpack I'd hidden in my closet 2 weeks earlier. Inside, 3 changes of clothes, my laptop, a small jewelry box containing my grandmother's necklace, the only family member who'd ever truly seen me, and an envelope with every dollar I'd managed to hide away. I scribbled a note, 5 words long. "I'll show you who I am." Standing at my bedroom door, I took one final look at the prison that had been disguised as protection. My hand trembled on the doorknob, not from fear of leaving, but from the terrifying possibility that they might be right. What if I couldn't survive without them? What if this was the biggest mistake of my life? But as I crept down the stairs and slipped out the front door into the cold night air, another question burned brighter. What if they were wrong? The brutal beginning. The Super 8 motel sign buzzed with a sickly yellow glow as I handed over $89 for a single night's stay. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and forgotten dreams. I sat on the edge of the bed, My backpack still clutched against my chest, and for the first time, the magnitude of what I'd done crashed over me. No safety net, no familiar ceiling to stare at, no one to call. At 2:17 a.m., I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered against my ribs as if trying to escape. The panic attack gripped me with such force that I slid from the bed to the floor, back pressed against the wall, gasping for air that wouldn't come. No one heard me. No one came running with a glass of water and reassurances. In that moment of crushing solitude, I understood the cunning of my family's trap. They had made dependence feel like love. Morning came with swollen eyes and a hollow stomach. I had exactly $148 left. Not enough for another night if I wanted to eat for the next week. I scrolled through my phone contacts, my thumb hovering over names I'd considered friends, people I'd grown up with, people who'd sat at our dinner table and complained about their parents while envying my perfect family. Rachel answered on the fourth ring. "Olivia, it's been forever." Her enthusiasm withered when I explained my situation. Stay with me? I mean, I would, but Brad just moved in and we're kind of... It's just not a good time. A pause. "Have you called your parents? They must be worried sick." By the fifth call, the pattern was clear. Everyone loved the idea of supporting someone's brave new beginning, but no one wanted the inconvenience of an actual person sleeping on their couch. "You made your point." My mother's voicemail played in my head. "Come home when you're ready." I found myself in a coffee shop nursing the cheapest drink on the menu while searching for jobs on my laptop. A barista approached, not to ask me to leave, as I'd feared, but to offer a fresh coffee. "You look like you could use this," she said. Her name tag read Diana. "And maybe a sandwich?" On me. I almost wept at this small kindness from a stranger when those I'd counted on had vanished. "I can't accept," I started. "Then pay it forward someday," Diana interrupted, sliding the plate toward me. "Whatever you're running from or to, you need fuel." That night, Diana let me sleep on her couch in a one-bedroom apartment she shared with 2 cats. While she slept, I opened a notebook she'd lent me and wrote by the dim light of a side lamp. Day 1 of being no one's disappointment but my own. They think I'll crawl back by Sunday. They're wrong. I would rather sleep in a bus station than prove them right. Note to self, what do I have that no one can take away? My mind, my hands, my will. Start there. Survive first. Thrive later. Prove them wrong forever. I didn't know then that this hastily written journal entry would become my manifesto for the months ahead. I didn't know that Diana would become the first thread in a new tapestry of relationships built on genuine support rather than obligation. And I certainly didn't know that the path from that couch to standing on my own would be paved with humiliations I hadn't yet imagined. But sitting there in the blue darkness, hungry despite the sandwich and terrified despite the temporary shelter, I made a promise to myself. I would rather fail 1,000 times on my own terms than succeed once on theirs. The invisible climb, 3 jobs, coffee shop opener at 5 a.m., data entry temp from 11 to 4, restaurant hostess until midnight. Sleep became a luxury I could afford for only 4 hours a night. My hands developed calluses, my feet permanent blisters. My single mattress lay directly on the floor of a studio apartment I shared with another girl I barely knew, a friend of Diana's who needed to split her rent. The worst part wasn't the exhaustion that seeped into my bones or the ramen dinners I'd grown to hate. It was the calls. Every Wednesday and Sunday, like clockwork, my phone would light up with my mother's name. "We're just checking in," she'd say, voice dripping with rehearsed concern. "Your room is exactly how you left it." Then my father would take the phone. "This little adventure has gone on long enough, don't you think? Pride is one thing, Olivia, but this is becoming ridiculous." What they couldn't see was the spreadsheet on my laptop tracking every dollar saved. What they couldn't hear were the YouTube tutorials I watched during my lunch breaks, teaching myself advanced graphic design skills. What they couldn't feel was my determination hardening like concrete with each dismissive word they spoke. "We're just worried," my mother would finish. "You know you can always come home." Home. As if that house had ever truly been mine. After 97 days of this existence, yes, I counted every single one, I stood in an empty studio apartment with windows that actually opened, holding a key that belonged only to me. At $8.75 a month, it strained my budget to breaking, but it was mine. Completely mine. I took a video as I walked through the space. The kitchenette with its 2-burner stove, the bathroom with the cracked tile I would learn to love, the main room that would serve as bedroom, office, and living space all in one. In the video, you can hear my voice breaking as I whisper, "I did this. Me. No one else." That night, I slept on an air mattress I'd bought from a thrift store. My only furniture was a folding table I'd found by a dumpster, cleaned meticulously, and repurposed as a desk. But I slept more soundly than I had in years, knowing that every inch of this space existed because I had made it possible. 3 weeks later came the moment that nearly broke me. I'd lost the hostess job after the restaurant changed ownership. The temp agency hadn't called in days. My bank account showed $267, and rent was due in 2 weeks. Standing in my shower, the only place I allowed myself to cry, I watched water swirl down the drain and felt my resolve doing the same. My phone sat on the bathroom counter, my father's number already pulled up on the screen. One call, one admission of defeat, the words already forming in my throat. "You were right. I can't do this." My finger hovered over the call button when my phone buzzed with a text. An unknown number. "Hi, Olivia. This is Marcus from Westside Print. Saw your online portfolio. We have a rush job. Client needs wedding invitations designed by Friday. Interested? $400 flat fee." I stood dripping in my tiny bathroom, staring at those words as if they were written in a foreign language. My online portfolio, the one I'd been building at 2 a.m. after exhausting shifts, the one I'd shared in Facebook groups and local business pages, the one that had received zero interest until this moment. I didn't call my father that night. Instead, I stayed up until dawn, creating 3 different invitation designs. Marcus chose all 3. The bride cried when she saw them. They paid me $600 instead of $400. It wasn't enough to solve everything, but it was enough to keep me from making that call, enough to remind me why I'd left in the first place. And somewhere in that sleepless night of creation, I discovered something my family had never seen in me. Not just determination, but talent. Not just stubbornness, but vision. The first flickering evidence that perhaps the person they had so thoroughly dismissed never actually existed at all. The transformation. Hidden talents are often buried beneath the expectations of others. Mine had been suffocated under years of my family telling me what I wasn't good at, rather than helping me discover what I was. But in that desperate design session for wedding invitations, something awakened that couldn't be put back to sleep. Marcus from Westside Print called again and again. Word spread among local businesses looking for affordable design work. My phone, once dreaded for the family calls it would bring, began to ping with client requests. "You have an eye," Marcus told me one afternoon as I dropped off files. "Most designers I work with, they follow trends. You see something different." I wanted to tell him that different had never been a compliment in my house. Different meant difficult. Different meant disappointing. Instead, I just thanked him and asked if he knew anyone else who might need design work. He introduced me to Elaine, who owned a boutique marketing agency specializing in small businesses. She needed someone to create social media graphics. Nothing fancy, just consistent work. "I can't hire you full-time," she warned, "but I can guarantee 20 hours a week. 20 hours at a reasonable rate meant I could drop the coffee shop job. More sleep. More time to build my portfolio. More breathing room in my budget." 3 months later, I stood in IKEA, buying my first real desk. 4 months after that, I upgraded from my air mattress to a proper bed frame and mattress. Small victories that no one else saw but that I celebrated with quiet intensity. My tiny apartment slowly transformed from an empty space into a home. Plants lined my windowsill, living things I kept alive with daily attention. Art I admired covered walls that had once been bare. Each edition purchased with money I had earned. Each placement a decision that belonged solely to me. The turning point came unexpectedly, as turning points often do. Elaine called on a Tuesday morning. "One of our biggest clients is rebranding. They need a complete package, logo, website, print materials, the works. I recommended you. Me? I nearly dropped my phone. Not your regular design firm? They want fresh eyes. Someone who isn't trapped in corporate thinking. A pause. It's a big project, Olivia. If you nail this, it changes everything. The client was a regional chain of organic markets looking to expand nationally. Their budget reflected their ambitions. The number Elaine quoted made me sit down on my second-hand couch, hand pressed against my mouth. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. I researched their industry, their competitors, their customers. I created mood boards and color studies. I sketched until my hand cramped. When I finally presented my concepts to their executive team, my voice shook for the first 5 minutes before finding its strength. They didn't just like my work. They loved it. This is exactly what we've been trying to articulate, their marketing director said. How did you understand our vision so completely? I didn't tell them that when you spend your life being misunderstood, you develop an acute sensitivity to what others are truly trying to say beneath their words. The day their final payment hit my account, I took a screenshot. My balance, 12,183.42, 5 figures. More money than I had ever possessed at one time. I printed the screenshot and pinned it to my wall, not as a celebration of wealth, but as evidence of possibility. That same week, I hired my first subcontractor to help with overflow work. The week after that, I registered my business as an LLC, Olivia Reed Design Studio. My name, claiming space in the world. New friends entered my life, not the convenient friendships of proximity from my hometown, but connections forged through shared passion and mutual respect. Diana from the coffee shop, Marcus from the print studio, Elaine who took a chance on me. My roommate who had become a sister by choice rather than blood. We celebrated birthdays and job promotions and small victories around dinner tables where no one kept score. I built a life they said I couldn't have. I became a person they said I couldn't be. And then, 13 months after I walked out of my parents' house with nothing but a backpack and 230 a cream envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside, a wedding invitation. My cousin Sophia was getting married. The RSVP card stared up at me, waiting for a response that would determine whether I was finally ready to face the people who had defined me for so long and show them the woman who had redefined herself. The return. The wedding invitation sat on my desk for 17 days before I checked "will attend." My hand hovered over the small square of paper for so long that the pen left a tiny dot of ink where it touched. Physical evidence of my hesitation. Sophia and I had been close as children before drifting apart in our teens. Her wedding wasn't just any family event. It would gather everyone: aunts, uncles, cousins, my brother Michael, and my parents. For weeks, I prepared myself like a soldier heading into battle. I bought a dress that cost more than I would have spent in my previous life. Deep blue, structured shoulders, a silent statement of confidence. I had my hair cut and colored by a professional for the first time ever. Small armor pieces, each one fortifying me for what was coming. The night before my flight home, Elaine called. "I packed something for you," she said when I answered. "Come outside." She stood in the hallway holding a leather portfolio case embossed with my company logo. Inside were business cards, a tablet with my portfolio loaded, and printed samples of my best work. "What's this for?" I asked. "Evidence," she replied simply. "Not for them, for you. When doubt creeps in, and it will, this is your reminder of who you've become." The drive from the airport to my hometown stretched longer than I remembered. I'd rented a car, another first, unwilling to ask anyone to pick me up. The playlist I'd curated for this journey shifted between songs that had carried me through my darkest nights and anthems of resilience that had greeted my brightest mornings. Halfway there, stopped at a red light, I found myself rehearsing potential conversations. Yes, I'm doing well. Too modest. I own my own design studio now. Too boastful. I'm sorry it took so long to visit. Why apologize? I pulled over at a rest stop, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. In the silence, I spoke aloud the words I'd been repeating like a mantra for days. You are not who they say you are. You never were. The wedding ceremony passed in a blur. I slipped into the church moments before it began, sat in the back, and left before the receiving line formed. The reception would be the real confrontation. No easy escape routes, nowhere to hide. I arrived at the venue 20 minutes late on purpose. The parking lot was full, the party in full swing. Through the windows, I could see tables of familiar faces, champagne glasses catching light, laughter visible even if I couldn't hear it. For one cowardly moment, I considered driving away, back to the airport, back to my carefully constructed new life where no one knew the old Olivia. But that would mean they still held power over me. That would mean I hadn't really escaped at all. I checked my lipstick in the rearview mirror, straightened my shoulders, and walked in. The first person to spot me was my Aunt Caroline, whose eyes widened with such comical surprise that I almost laughed. Then my cousin Thomas, doing a double take as I passed. Whispers followed me across the room like ripples in still water. My mother saw me first. She was at the dessert table, arranging something with her perpetual need for control. When she glanced up, the fork in her hand clattered against the plate. My father turned at the sound, following her frozen gaze to where I stood. For one suspended moment, we stared at each other across the crowded room. These people who had known me my entire life suddenly confronted with a stranger wearing their daughter's face. I walked toward them with measured steps, aware of every eye tracking my movement. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat, a gesture so familiar it nearly broke my composure. My father's expression shifted from shock to something I couldn't quite read. "Olivia," my mother finally managed, her voice barely audible above the music. You look different," I supplied when she couldn't finish. "Hello, Mom. Dad. We weren't sure you'd come," my father said, struggling to maintain his usual authoritative tone. "You never responded to our calls." "I've been busy," I said simply. The awkward silence that followed was mercifully interrupted by the appearance of my brother Michael, who approached with the cautious expression of someone encountering an unfamiliar dog. "Holy shit, Liv," he blurted, his eyes traveling from my hair to my shoes. "What happened to you?" I smiled, feeling the power shift perceptibly in my direction. Life happened. My life. Before anyone could respond, Sophia spotted me from across the room and rushed over, throwing her arms around me with genuine delight. "You came! I can't believe you actually came!" In her embrace, I felt a flash of the family connection I had once craved. Uncomplicated, untainted by expectations. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears and something like pride. "You have to tell me everything," she insisted. "Where you've been, what you're doing? You look amazing." As I opened my mouth to respond, my father cleared his throat. "Yes, Olivia. Why don't you tell us all what you've been doing since you left?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. The unspoken question hung in the air between us. "Did you fail? Are you here to admit we were right?" I met his gaze steadily, feeling strangely calm now that the moment had arrived. "Actually," I said, "I'd be happy to tell you exactly what I've been doing." And I reached for the leather portfolio I'd carried in with me, ready to show them exactly who Olivia Reed had become. The silence. We claimed a corner table, away from the dance floor where distant relatives twirled in blissful ignorance of the reckoning unfolding in our quiet corner. My parents sat side by side, my father's posture rigid with defensiveness, my mother's hands nervously folding and refolding her napkin. Michael slouched in his chair, feigning disinterest while missing nothing. Sophia had excused herself to attend to wedding duties, squeezing my arm with quiet encouragement as she left. I had imagined this moment for months. In my darkest fantasies, I had scripted a blistering takedown, every injury catalogued, every dismissive comment thrown back at them with interest. I had rehearsed cold indifference, practiced casual success, considered tearful reconciliation. What emerged instead was something entirely unplanned. "I design things," I began simply, opening the portfolio. Logos, websites, marketing materials. I started with wedding invitations, actually. I laid out samples on the white tablecloth, physical evidence of creativity they had never nurtured, talent they had never acknowledged. "This campaign increased the client's revenue by 30% in 1 quarter," I continued, pointing to a series of advertisements I'd created for a local business. And this rebrand launched last month for a company that's expanding nationally. My mother leaned forward despite herself, examining the work with genuine curiosity. My father remained immobile, jaw working slightly as if chewing on words he wasn't ready to swallow. I have my own company now, Olivia Reed Design Studio. The name still felt like a magic spell when I spoke it aloud. These are my business cards. I had to order more last week because I ran out. I placed one in front of each of them. My father picked his up, turning it over as if searching for evidence of deception. And this, I said, pulling out my tablet and opening a banking app, is my business account as of yesterday. I placed it in front of them, the number clearly visible. 47,326.19. My mother's sharp intake of breath broke the silence. That's more than I made my first year at the firm, Michael muttered, no longer pretending disinterest. I have 3 contractors working with me now, I continued, swiping to show photos of my small but growing team. And clients booked 4 months out. I'm actually considering hiring an assistant to manage the workload. I laid out each piece of evidence methodically, like an attorney building an irrefutable case. Client testimonials, press coverage from a local business journal, photos of my apartment, small but stylish, every inch a reflection of my taste rather than others' expectations. The table fell silent as they absorbed the undeniable reality before them. I had not only survived without them, I had flourished. "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother finally asked, her voice small. "All those calls, and you never said, 'Would you have believed me?'" I countered quietly. My father cleared his throat. "This is impressive, Olivia. I didn't realize you had such a head for business." The faint note of surprise in his voice, still there even now, made something harden in my chest. "That's the thing, Dad. You never realized a lot of things about me. Neither of you did." I closed the portfolio deliberately. "You were so busy telling me who I was that you never bothered to ask." My mother's eyes filled with tears. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen so often growing up, but something rawer. Perhaps the first honest emotion we'd shared in years. "We were trying to protect you," she whispered. "We only wanted to keep me small," I finished for her. "To keep me dependent. To keep me from discovering that I never needed your protection. I needed your faith." My father's face had gone pale, the practiced authority draining away to reveal something I'd never seen before. Uncertainty. "You walked out," he said finally, without a word. "Just left that note. 5 words." I nodded. "I'll show you who I am." And I did. "This," I gestured to the evidence laid out between us, "is who I am, who I always was, underneath everything you projected onto me." Michael, uncharacteristically silent until now, looked from our parents to me with new eyes. "Jesus, Liv, I had no idea." "None of you did," I said simply. The weight of everything unsaid pressed down on our table like a physical force. Around us, the wedding reception continued, glasses clinking, music playing, joy unfolding. But in our corner, time seemed suspended in the vacuum of revelation. My mother reached out hesitantly, her fingers stopping just short of touching mine. Can you forgive us?" The question hung in the air between us. I looked at these people who had shaped me through both love and limitation, whose approval I had craved for so long, whose opinion of me had defined my existence for 27 years. "I'm not here for forgiveness," I said finally. "I'm here to set us all free." And in the silence that followed, the complete absence of justification or defense, I finally heard what I had been waiting for all along, the sound of their certainty crumbling. The drive back to my hotel that night was different from any journey I'd ever taken. The same streets, the same turns I'd navigated countless times growing up, but everything had changed. I had changed. I rolled down the windows despite the chill, letting the night air rush over me as I replayed those final moments at the wedding. My mother's tears, my father's stunned silence, Michael's newfound respect in his eyes. None of it had unfolded as I'd imagined, yet somehow it had been exactly what needed to happen. There had been no screaming match, no dramatic storming out, just the quiet devastation of truth finally spoken aloud. "I'm not here for forgiveness," I'm here to set us all free." Those words had emerged from some deep, knowing place within me that understood something crucial. This confrontation had never really been about them at all. For 13 months, I had believed I was building a life to prove them wrong. Every dollar saved, every client secured, every small victory had been mentally dedicated to the moment I could throw my success in their faces. I had carried them with me in my determination to contradict them. But somewhere along the way, without noticing, I had stopped defining myself in opposition to their expectations. I had started building something for me alone. The revelation I hadn't anticipated, the one that washed over me now as I drove through the sleeping town of my childhood, was that true independence wasn't proving them wrong. It was no longer needing to. I pulled over at the lookout point above the town, a place where teenagers parked to dream of escape and where I had come countless times, imagining a different life. The lights of the town twinkled below, smaller than I remembered. For so long, I had believed freedom meant physical distance from this place, from those people. But sitting there, I understood that true freedom was the distance I had traveled within myself. From a girl who believed what others told her about her capabilities to a woman who tested those capabilities every day and found them boundless. My phone buzzed with a text. "Elaine, how did it go? All limbs still attached?" I smiled, thinking of my chosen family waiting for me back home. The people who saw me clearly from the beginning, who believed in me not despite my uncertainties, but because of the courage that drove me through them. "Better than expected," I texted back. "I'll tell you everything tomorrow." As I started the car again, I realized I no longer needed my parents to acknowledge who I'd become. Their recognition, or lack thereof, no longer defined my worth. The validation I had sought for so long had finally come from the only place it ever truly mattered, from within. The next morning, before my flight, I visited my childhood home one last time, not to reopen wounds or seek further resolution, but to reclaim the parts of my past worth keeping. My mother cried again when I hugged her goodbye, this time perhaps with understanding rather than manipulation. My father shook my hand awkwardly, still unsure how to relate to this unfamiliar daughter. "Will you visit again?" my mother asked at the door. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice, but not because I need to, because I choose to. The distinction made all the difference. If you're watching this now, perhaps you recognize yourself in my story. Perhaps you too have been told who you are by people who never took the time to ask. Perhaps you've been defined by others' limitations rather than your own possibilities. This isn't just about family. It's about anyone who has ever made you feel that you couldn't survive without them, whether it's a partner, a friend, a boss, or a parent. Here's what I want you to know. The first step is the hardest. Walking away feels impossible until you do it. And yes, there will be nights spent crying on bathroom floors, moments of doubt so profound they threaten to send you running back to the familiar cage of others' expectations. But beyond those moments lies a version of yourself you haven't met yet. Someone stronger, braver, and more capable than anyone ever gave you credit for being. Someone who was there all along, waiting for permission to exist. You don't need to make a dramatic exit or burn bridges to find this person. You just need to start listening to your own voice above the chorus of others telling you who you are. My name is Olivia, I'm 27, and I learned that the family you create through your journey matters more than the one you were born into. But most importantly, I learned that the greatest act of courage isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right.